All right, so hi everybody. My name is Alexa Piscanio, and I am doing my PowerPoint presentation and my overall literary research article on psychedelics and the Lacanian real. I'm specifically using Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas as a vehicle by which I investigate this, relation. So I'm exploring fictional depictions of psychedelic trips in Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, how psychedelics are the new access to the Lacanian real, and I'm really excited to show you guys this presentation. I'm really intrigued in everything that's kind of going on with my research. Really, I think it's just a fascinating topic, but I do want to give a content warning. I will be talking a lot about drugs outside of psychedelics, and I will be talking a lot about orgasm and sex. So this is a trigger warning to anybody who finds these topics unsettling. And with that, I don't feel the need too much to really kind of establish Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas as a story, because it's very much a stream of consciousness novel, which is why I want to start this presentation by relating to you guys the first paragraph of the novel. And I am specifically talking about the novel, not the film, which reads that we were somewhere around Barstow on the edge of the desert when the drugs began to take hold. I remember saying something like, "I feel a bit lightheaded. Maybe you should drive." And suddenly there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping and screeching and diving around the car, which was going about 100 miles an hour with the top down to Las Vegas. So Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is a stream of consciousness novel, right? And we're going to kill the body so the head will die. It was a 1971 semi-autobiographical short novel written by Hunter S. Thompson, detailing protagonist Raoul Duke's drug-crazed American odyssey to Las Vegas, Nevada. American Odyssey texts are narratives that usually depict a cis, straight, white male embarking on a journey across the United States to escape his life and find a new reality, usually in search of finding oneself sexually, spiritually, and situationally. And what I mean by situationally is more or less like, what am I doing with my life? What is my purpose in life? We can look at other American Odyssey texts, such as On the Road by Jack Kerouac, where the main character was a real person, Chris McCandless, is really kind of just searching for his purpose in life. And that's kind of what Raoul Duke and Gonzo, to an extent, are doing. They're just kind of going on this trip and really just kind of experimenting with a lot of things to really just kind of figure out who they are. So during Raoul Duke, which is a personification of Hunter S. Thompson himself and his lawyer, Dr. Gonzo's trek from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Now, I know a lot of you who've seen the film might be like, wait, it's San Francisco. In the film, they mention they're going from San Francisco to Las Vegas. In the text, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Hollywood are used interchangeably. And, I will bring up the idea of this unreliable narrator we have kind of going on, because they are on drugs. So I wasn't really sure which one to use, but I'm going to stick with Los Angeles to Las Vegas because the trip overall is pretty short. And time-wise in the narrative, it just wouldn't make sense for them to have started in San Francisco, but again, we're not really sure. So Los Angeles to Las Vegas, they experiment with a multitude of drugs mixed with alcohol, sexual scenarios, and of course, driving. As the men experience heroic doses of psilocybin, which are magic mushrooms, marijuana, MDMA, which is a party drug, party compound, makes you very ampy. The term rolling is used with MDMA, and LSD, which is acid. They come to recognize that while on hallucinogens, one must kill the body so the head will die. And I want to point out really quick before I continue that heroic doses are different than, I guess, normal psychedelic experience, because heroic doses are a mixture between large doses of psilocybin or LSD, whichever psychedelic, and another drug, whether that's marijuana, MDMA, mescaline, all these other drugs that are out there, meth. Really scary. I mean, people will take these doses knowing the risk that it could end very poorly for them. A lot of people will mix large doses of shrooms, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and acid. They'll mix large doses of acid with marijuana, etc. So that's kind of what they're doing in this novel. They're not just taking these normal psychedelic trips. These are very intense drug combinations going on. So Thompson writes that on these experiences, they have to kill the body so the head will die. And this leads both characters to disassociate their minds from their bodies and return to a state of being that really just predates language, the Lacanian real. So hopefully you guys can see where I'm going with this. But I do also want to point out that, with this slide back here, we're starting the novel already in the drug craze. We are not starting the novel from a sober perspective. And throughout the novel, they're going to be on drugs. They're going to be, basically inebriated. There's not really a point in this novel, short story really, there's not really a point where they're sober. And this is kind of important to the overall point I'm going to be making in a couple slides here. But I want to talk about the breakdown of Lacan's 3 stages before I really get into the meat of my presentation. And I want to point out this photo here, or this painting here, is a portrait of Lacan himself. It's an abstract portrait. I thought it was really cool, and it kind of fit the aesthetic of my overall presentation, so I decided to include it. But getting into these stages, the first stage is known as the real. It's really only experienced as a baby before language shapes your conception of the world. The real, Lacan believes, is the only state of being in which you exist in this primal, primordial state, only basing your life off of primitive physical needs. Babies cry when they need food. Their only attachment to their caretaker is really just obligatory, and it's based off basic needs for survival. These feelings are not, they're basically completely thoughtless. They're based in physical needs indescribable by language, which Lacan also argues orgasm is indescribable by language. And the only way to really experience the real in adulthood is through orgasm. Now, I think we need to remember that Lacan was writing during the 1960s and 70s and the 1950s. So, outlooks on orgasm as being describable or indescribable have definitely changed since then. The second stage is known as the imaginary, and at this stage, children really form conceptions of themselves via mere images of themselves and the people around them. And the only conception of identity they have is not really physical or unified yet, but it's still present. The child really recognizes its appearance and body, but has not really developed a personality independent of themselves yet. It's really just mirrors of influences around them, really kind of dependent on their parents' attention to them. When this attention is really diverted elsewhere to a sibling or a spouse, the child feels that their identity has been crushed and they would like to destroy that which takes their parent away from them. The child's identity here is imaginary, since it cannot really understand complex relationships or even form really complex thoughts, and only really conceives itself through image and special attention. Why toddlers are very self-centered. Dr. Toys' notes at the beginning of the semester, I think in September, I thought were really helpful in breaking down Lacan. I actually don't even cite Lacan in this actual presentation. The reason for that is his language is so convoluted. I've found so many other sources breaking down Lacan that I think really helped me understand Lacan way more. But Toys writes that because Lacan is not yet seen as a system of abstract meaning that replaces the experience, because language is not yet seen as a system of abstract meaning that replaces the experiential or perceptual, names and concepts cannot stabilize your identity. You're always dependent on the literal approval or mirroring of a parent or parental figure, or some other with whom you identify with and or struggle. Finally, the last stage is known as the symbolic, in which the child leaves the imaginary behind and is now able to actually use language to explain and form their identity. So little Tommy is now Tommy. He's not Tommy, etc., with this parental influence and whoever mom wants me to be. The stage is not incredibly important really to my overall presentation. So for time's sake, I'm just kind of going to leave it at that. Moving on, I'm going to do a quick review of Lacanian philosophy, just these very compressed ideas. Lacan believes that as humans, we're subject to 3 mental stages of development. The first being the real, no language, no identity, really only feeling in this primal existence. The imaginary being minimal grasp of language, some physical identity, and feelings really of obligation. I do things because mom or dad wants me to, or I do things because I'm sad or I'm angry, these obligatory emotional feelings. And the symbolic, which is a common grasp of language, physical and emotional identity, and a full range of personality. So with that, I have the Lacanian idea of the real, but in modern sense, what is the real? Well, Lacan believes that the real cannot literally be described by language, as the body exists in its pure, unintelligible, unsymbolizable, and pure organic state. And with that, we as humans are not capable of accessing that reality except for a few fleeting moments, specifically through orgasm. And this is what Lacan believes, because this action is the only disruption of the mind from the body, which allows us to re-enter the real. So as stated before, Lacan really argues that the real can only be experienced through sexual orgasm or as a baby. But what about the voluntary use of psychedelics? Well, to answer this question, we have to know what psychedelics do to the mind and the body. Well, the National Health Institute reports that psychedelics cause individuals to disassociate and feel disconnected from their body and environment and kind of exist in this pure organic state, disconnected from the mind, but still functioning. Furthermore, researchers R.L. Carhart and K.J. Furston found in a 2015 study, which is absolutely fascinating, that individuals on hallucinogens, specifically LSD and LSA, which is like a street form of LSD, it's not very safe for you, and psilocybin, have similar brain activity to individuals experiencing orgasm. So the same areas of the brain basically are lighting up when they're using those like brain maps. As on orgasm, or when someone's experiencing orgasm versus when someone's on psychedelics. And this ego death that they report is experienced by the brain on hallucinogens mirrors the same little death, jouissance, orgasm literally means from French to English, little death, that is purported to occur during orgasm. However, during psychedelic experience, the brain extends this sensation over the course of hours, whereas jouissance is an intense and momentary experience. So they're really kind of comparing these two sensations. And really the main comparison, or the main like point of difference here, is that psychedelics last longer. And this is just fascinating to me. So in experiencing ego death, R.A. Durr kind of investigates this idea of depersonalization, which today we would refer to as like dissociation. This was written in the 70s, in which an individual on psychedelic substances detaches from the conscious self and their ego. By releasing the ego from the self, Durr relates that this action allows individuals to reunite with forms of themselves, past or present, not unlike the idea that returning to the real is a reuniting force that brings one back to their childhood self. This means that psychedelics work to activate the same pleasure-inducing areas of the brain that normally sexual drive stimulates. Yet psychedelics are still able to detach the body from the mind, keeping the brain in this consistent state of pleasure, even if you're having a bad trip, and the body in a state of this kind of pure existence. So it's very fascinating. So how does this kind of all connect? Well, Jacques Lacan's belief that jouissance, or orgasm, is an abrupt, oh no, my thing got cut off here, is the more intense and abrupt confrontation of the body to the mind, is not really unlike the intense, abrupt confrontation and disassociation of the body from the mind that's experienced on psychedelics. Furthermore, Lacan suggests that discourse, or language specifically as an institution, creates a hole in the real that can only be experienced through the body's pure and organic state experienced during orgasm. This hole in the real suggests that Lacan believes there are forces outside of jouissance that can provide us access to the real, but that he really just hadn't investigated it yet. Thompson creates a fictional account of lived experiences returning to the real through drug use, as he describes the entrance into a trip as involving a total severance of all connection between body and brain, which is interesting because the brain continues to function more or less normally, and you can actually watch yourself behaving in this terrible way, but you cannot control it. So this disconnection of the body from the mind really just demonstrates what Lacan refers to as the hole in the real, as the descriptions of psychedelic hallucinations disassociate the body from the mind and remove individuals from an existence heavily policed by language. Hopefully you can see where I'm going here. And even Duke, our main character, reports that drugs are a form of escapism from our twisted reality, which is constructed by a pig institution, which I thought was really funny, as he states that in his experience with psychedelics, there is also the socio-psychic factor. Every now and then when your life gets complicated and the weasels start closing in, the only real cure is to load up on the heinous chemicals and then drive like a bastard from Hollywood to Las Vegas to relax, as it were, in the womb of the desert sun. Now, the pig institution that Duke is really referring to here is this cis white male institution. And even though Raoul Duke lives in this institution and is privileged by it, he's able to kind of recognize his privilege. He's able to say, this reality that I live in privileges one group of people, and I want to be able to escape that. I want to be able to experience something different, which is very fascinating. So with that, the real has taken a new form in mainstream drug experiences. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas stands as proof that the Lacanian real has taken a new form in these mainstream drug experiences. Thompson's depictions of psychedelic experience as an escape from our everyday twisted reality reveals the fallacies and purely sexual returns to an organic state, and instead suggests that the Lacanian real can in fact be voluntarily induced and accessed outside of jouissance through intentional psychedelic drug use. So basically, psychedelics are now this voluntary access to the real. We don't have to wait for this, intense orgasmic experience to return to the real. We can actually induce it ourselves, which is just absolutely interesting. So, in conclusion, psychedelic experience is a new avenue by which we can access the real. And by accessing the real via drugs, individuals have the option to regularly access the real, thereby really just kind of furthering our understanding of existence before language defined us. I think challenging Lacan's idea that jouissance is really the only access to the real kind of shows that the whole in the real, this idea that he even kind of stated that there are possibilities outside of jouissance that would allow us to return to this, exists as kind of like a gap. And there's probably way more avenues by which we can access the real. There's probably, it's probably not just drugs. There's probably way more possibilities out there. And I would love to investigate them all, but I don't have time for that. But I just think this is a really fascinating topic. And thank you guys so much for listening to my presentation. Here's my works cited. My works cited for my images, I'm going to be uploading separate of this just because there was just so many and it just kind of made this literally non-visible. But thank you guys so much for listening to my presentation. I had a great time with this, and thank you so much.